Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 4-year-old named Kylie and I also have a 2-year-old named Mia. So for today's short and sweet video, I'm actually going to be answering a question that I received from one of you guys, and I will actually read it out to you. It was from Jessica. She wanted to know, what is your approach to dining out with the girls with other friends or in large groups? Obviously harder to do now with COVID, but she just keeps seeing parents plopping their kids in front of a screen at meals and thinking to herself that there has to be another way. And there is. I've got you. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so first things first, I think it's really important that you set appropriate expectations for yourself and for your child when you're going out into these kinds of situations. It's not really developmentally appropriate to expect an infant or a young toddler or even a preschooler to a degree to sit down for an extended period of time in a restaurant setting and expect them to be on their best behavior the entire length of time, especially if you're there for a really long time. That's just not a realistic thing that most kids will be able to handle at that age. And this isn't to say that you have to put your entire social life on hold and never go to a restaurant again. But I do think that it's important to, like I said, temper your expectations. I think sometimes parents falsely believe that their children are capable of doing these kinds of things, and then they bring them out into these situations and very quickly find out that they're not, and then they feel kind of blindsided. And you have to realize that it's just not something that little kids are typically capable of doing. So can you bring a baby or a young child to a restaurant with you? Yes, absolutely. I think that you can and that you should, not only for your own sanity as a parent and to maintain your own social life, but also for your child, because they are going to need those kinds of life experiences as they get older anyway. They're going to have to get accustomed to it at some point, and there's no reason to wait. So you can absolutely take them out with you. I just think that it's also important for you to remember as the parent that it's not necessarily the most developmentally appropriate situation for them. And so things might not go according to plan. And sometimes that might even include actually getting up and leaving the restaurant for a short period of time until your child is able to regain composure, or potentially just ending the meal and leaving altogether. That is definitely a possibility that is on the table, no pun intended. But just to keep yourself aware that that might happen. And as long as you're okay with that, I think that you're setting yourself and your child up for success a lot better going into the situation. And so knowing this, I think we can all agree then it would be foolish to go out to a restaurant with absolutely no activities, with no ideas for what you're going to do to help your child stay entertained at their, developmentally appropriate age level for the entire length of time that you're expecting to be there. You're just kind of going out, winging it. And I think it's this part of it that parents sometimes tend to forget about. And so they go completely unprepared and then find themselves sitting there with a child who doesn't want to be sitting still anymore. And out of desperation, they'll pull out their phones, throw it in front of their child, and they know that they'll sit there and be passively entertained for the remaining length of time with no problem. And so then it becomes the default because it's easy. And I totally get that. I 100% can empathize with that situation. But if you're really trying to keep your child away from screens more than whatever time you typically allow, and you're not allowing your child to just zone out whenever you're at a restaurant, then it's important to think ahead of time about what kinds of things you want to bring with you, or what kinds of little games you can play with your child while you're at the restaurant to help them get through those tough times, maybe before the food arrives and stuff. And that's not to say that you have to be your child's entertainer the entire time you're at the restaurant, because I do think there is something to be said also for your child learning just how to be a patron at a restaurant, learning how to sit in their chair and observe what's going on, and to learn, the etiquette around having a meal out in a public setting. I think there's something to be said for that for sure. But there are going to be points, if we're being realistic, where your child might not be able to hold it together. And so having some of these little backup activities on hand is super helpful. So the activities that I'm referring to are going to be simple, easy things that you can toss right into your bag before you go, or actually what's even better, and this is what I do, is to keep a little zippered pouch in your bag at all times that always has a few of these little activities in it. This way you're never caught in a situation where you've forgotten to grab something before you leave. It's just always in your bag, ready to whip out whenever you need it and give it to your child or your children, and know that they'll be entertained for a little bit of time. And the kinds of activities are obviously going to be dependent on your child's age. So if you have a young infant, then you're probably probably going to want to toss in a couple little teethers, maybe some of their favorite toys that you know they really like, or some high contrast cards, or a black and white picture book, or some touch and feel books. Again, totally dependent on how old they are and what their current skill set and interests are. But if you can pick a few of these things ahead of time and toss them in your bag and keep them there, and only allow them to come out when you're in these restaurant settings, this way they maintain their novelty for a longer period of time, then you're set. And then if you have a slightly older child, like a toddler or a preschooler, as I do, then you can get a little bit more creative with some of these busy bags, as people call them. You can actually create like little activities. I'll see if I can find a couple of links for you guys and put them in the description box down below. There are so many different kinds of busy bags that you can create if you've got the time and you're willing to put in the effort. But honestly, I usually try to keep things super simple. I just keep like a little notebook with paper and some crayons. Also, stickers are always a really great hit with young children. A small pack of Wiki sticks, or the little tiny travel size things of Play-Doh, anything that's small enough to fit in these little zippered pouches. And again, just like 1 or 2 of them, nothing crazy, but always in the bag. So if you are planning to go out with your child to restaurants, that's something that I would certainly recommend doing, is to always have something in your bag on hand ready to go. But other things that you can do that don't even require prep or activity materials at all is to have a couple of little games that you know your child likes to play. And obviously this would be for slightly older children, like toddlers and preschoolers, but I know that both of my girls have always enjoyed playing What's Missing. So, you know, you pick a couple of random things from the table, like a fork and a spoon and like the napkin holder or something, or a straw, and you have them set out 3 things, and then they close their eyes, or you can take turns, you close your eyes, and you take one thing away and hide it, and then they have to guess what the missing item is. My girls love that game, and it's so easy to play. And then as they get a little bit older, you can play games like I Spy with them, with, you know, different colors or different objects. You can even sneak in a little bit of letter sound practice if you're playing I Spy with beginning sounds of words with a slightly older child. You can even bring along a couple of their favorite books. That's something that I've done in the past. Just having these kinds of things at the back of your mind and in your bag is super helpful to avoiding some of the common issues that you run into with children wanting to get up and run around because they're bored and they have nothing else to do, or, you know, having a tantrum over something super trivial because they're just tired of waiting for their food. Like, these are things that are bound to happen with little kids. And so it's on you really to be prepared. And as I said earlier, I think it bears repeating though, sometimes no matter what you do, no matter how many activities you have planned, sometimes your child is just not going to make it. None of these things is going to work to get them through the meal. And it could be just that they're having an off day. Maybe they are just way too overstimulated. Maybe the restaurant is really loud and there's a lot of people and lots of new faces and they're just not ready for it yet, and so they lose it. You have to be ready for these kinds of things to happen. It is just par for the course with young children, and you honestly can't really hold it against them. So when it happens, your best course of action is always to just take them out to the car or just outside somewhere where they can have a little bit more privacy, where they're not disturbing the other patrons in the restaurant, and help them process those emotions, get through it, whatever they need to do. If they are able to recoup and regain their composure where you feel comfortable enough to go back inside and finish your meal, awesome. But also realize that that might not happen either, and you very well might need to end your meal early and say your goodbyes early. And hopefully the friends that you're hanging out with at the restaurant would be understanding enough to know that, you know, that's just what happens with children and they're not going to be upset with you over it. I know it's not ideal, but this is real life, and real life is messy. And so all that to say, there is no real reason to plop a screen in front of your child just to keep them entertained. There are lots of other things that they can be doing that are much more mentally stimulating. Even just allowing your child, if they're happy and not complaining at all, time to just observe the coming and going of what's happening in the restaurant. Sometimes that's super fascinating for young children. I know that my girls love to people watch. They, especially when they were younger, they loved to just turn around in their little chair and just watch what was going on. Like, they thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so it was like the restaurant was providing entertainment in and of itself. And if I had jumped the gun and just thrown a screen in front of them ahead of time, then they might have missed all of that. And so I urge you not to just give your child a screen because you think they can't handle it. I mean, you're basically communicating that message to them when you do that. I think that you are not capable of doing this, so here's a screen, you're just gonna do this for the meantime instead. And that, I feel, is a really disempowering message to give your child. So give them the opportunity to show you that they can handle it before you bust out the activities and stuff, before you try any of the games, and then see how they do. You might be pleasantly surprised, as I know I was time and again, especially when my girls were younger. And you know, as Montessori parents, we have to remember that our goal is always to be providing our children with as many opportunities as possible for them to be independent and to experience success in whatever environments they find themselves in. And the only way that they're going to gain those skills is through practice. We tend to go on and on in the Montessori community about this idea of the prepared environment. And what we have to remember is that the prepared environment isn't always necessarily this perfect little bubble in our homes where we have 100% control over everything. Sometimes the prepared environment is the world outside, and we just have to make do with the situation as it is. So that's kind of what it's like when you're in a restaurant. You know, the environment is what it is, and we're maybe bringing along a few activities and have a few games and tricks up our sleeve in mind to help set up our child for success the best that we can. But otherwise, we have to trust in them that they are going to make the environment work for their needs. Okay, Jessica, so I hope that answered your question. And if there's anything that pops up for you guys watching this video, maybe questions of your own or some other ideas or advice that you have for going out into a restaurant as a Montessori parent, things that have worked for you, definitely share that with us in the comments down below. If you are interested in learning more about doing Montessori at home or positive discipline parenting, I also offer a couple of e-courses that walk you through it step by step. So I will be sure to leave a link to that in the description box down below, just in case you're interested in checking it out. And just in case you're new to my channel, I also wanted to let you know that this video is part of a much larger series on this YouTube channel called Montessori at Home, which is aimed at providing practical tips and advice for busy parents like you and I for implementing Montessori at home with our children. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in watching more of, then you might consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video, because I do upload a new one just like this one every single week. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.